Cool. Hey, everybody. It's the last day of April, April 30th, 2024. This is Gimbalabs Playground. We get together on Tuesdays to talk about stuff that matters to us and try to make sense of some ideas. We've been doing this for a couple of years. Season 3 started in September. We've been hosting this space since early 2021. And on this Miro link right here, I'll just grab the link and share it. If you're watching this recording later, you can find this Miro board at gimbalabs.com/playground. You can come, you can take a poke around, see what kind of presentations we've had. Several folks on this call have presented this year, and we've covered a lot of ground. And we're going into a really exciting run of presentations, starting with Kyle today. Last week's delayed decentralized identity presentation from Alex and Newman. Hinson's been working on a unique DeFi platform for a long time. Nin as well has been really driving innovation in building organizations. So excited to hear from him on digital identity. And at Builderfest last week, John and I were sharing a couple of stories before we went live today. Aistine was there as well and had some ideas around socially upgradable smart contracts that sounded strangely similar to some things that Mix has been sharing with us and we've been exploring together here. So I asked him if he wouldn't mind coming to lead a conversation here on the 28th. So really looking forward to that one. We typically follow the school year in the Northern Hemisphere, so we'll wrap up sometime in early June and probably take a little break from Playground for the summer. But if you have something you want to talk about before then, there's a couple slots left and anybody is free to sign up. All you have to do is visit this Miro board, find this little table right here, drop your info and what you want to talk about into this chart, and that's it. You're officially scheduled and we'll hope to see you here. This is the agenda that we typically follow. Spend a few minutes just catching up and sharing some announcements before jumping into a presentation. And the presentation can take any sort of form. Sometimes people want to pitch a product they've been working on. Other times share an early iteration of an idea and ask for feedback. Or maybe you just want to start an argument about something. Often it's sometimes a combination of all the above. And I'm looking forward to jumping in today with Kyle. Now, I understand, Steve, Kyle, you guys know each other from Twitter Spaces?
Yeah, I've met Steve over Twitter Spaces a few times. We've never
Yeah,
connected one-on-one, but yeah.
Cool. And I know you swung by once a couple of weeks ago, but thanks for coming back to talk about Save Network.
Did
Really
you guys
excited.
block
Yeah.
each other on Twitter anytime?
No, I don't think so.
That's
Yeah.
good. It's a
I don't
Twitter
know.
thing.
No,
I try not to
fortunately,
block
yeah.
anybody.
Yeah. I thought I
I'm
was
sure I never
talking to
have.
Patrick. I thought I was talking to Patrick Tobler last week, and turns out he was a scammer. Pretty funny.
Should block that
I
guy.
thought, I thought, man, that's strange. I would think Patrick's too busy to DM me.
That's what the
Yeah.
block is for.
Right.
Well,
Uh,
cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate um, the invite and, coming by a few weeks ago is really cool to just kind of see the format and yeah, like it really kind of helped me clear out some ideas and structures and thoughts in my brain into real format. So I was chatting a little bit with Alex at some point on the Intersect Discord, and he pointed to S3, right? It's like one of the frameworks you guys have developed. So we've been so essentially, let me start at the beginning. My name's Kyle.
we shouldn't
Yeah,
let
sorry.
us not take credit for S3. That's way bigger than Web3. We've
Okay.
just been playing around with it.
Well, that's great. Yeah, so my name's Kyle. I live here in Zambia. I've been here about 10 years. I came originally as a Peace Corps volunteer and spent about just over 2 years in a rural community as an English teacher and working with different community projects. After Peace Corps, me and my girlfriend from Peace Corps, who's also another volunteer, we got married and in 2018 we started a honey company here in Zambia. So we never really left Peace Corps, or we never really left Zambia. But we had a couple years of working for other people and different things. But we moved back out to the village, started a honey company where we distribute beehives around conservation areas to help, put a value on forests and reduce threats to national parks via alternative livelihoods that are more long-term and sustainable. So over the last couple of years, it's been really tough. As COVID hit, we were bringing investors on, and they turned out to be scammers. And then COVID hit, and then it was business partners out, and it just kind of threw me into a big loop and put me in a really bad place. But what brought me out of that was the promise of transparency in Web3 systems, is because the non-transparent nature of private business at times caused me to have deep personal issues with the systems we have. So as I've explored, I've come back to now an idea that's kind of sat in the back of my mind for a while as I've explored Cardano and Web3 around savings and lending groups. So when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, one of the groups I worked with was a savings and internal lending community. They used the framework developed by Catholic Relief Services called SILK. So it stands for Savings and Internal Lending Communities. And what that did was gave this group it started with about 20-ish women, 15 to 20 women, and they saved money every week, lent it out internally within those members. So it's a members-based organization. People would then go start a small business, or go trade something really quickly, or one of the examples that one woman would always go up to the lake, which is about like 6 to 8 hours away by bus. She'd go and get a loan the next day, be on the bus, like fill her everything with fresh fish and bring it back, and it'd all be gone, within the next day. And she would just run that cycle for that month that she had the liquidity to do it. So it was really successful. This group had 3 cycles during that time and saved and earned they grew up to about 70 women and saved and earned about $25,000 on their last cycle, which the first cycle was savings and earnings of $1,200. So, big growth. And I've always thought these are great mechanisms. I studied finance. I didn't want to go work on Wall Street. I remember thinking about Bitcoin in like a finance class in 2010 because I had read the white paper, and I was like, should I ask about this? And I was like, no, nobody will get it. I barely get it. And that was like the last place I left it for a while. But yeah, so what we've done with the Saved network is I've kind of brought together people from my network, from Web3 networks, from wherever, and brought some experts that I thought would bring high value, and opened up to the public as well. So one of my first advisors, I would say, on this was a woman named Amy, who's worked with savings and lending groups for about at least 15 years, running major programs with Catholic Relief Services. And from there, I put out my white paper, which kind of lays out the idea on how we enhance these groups. So in that white paper, I proposed that we kind of boost these savings groups, so that the problem is, proposed in the white paper, and we've kind of expanded on it now, is groups get stagnated. And stop me at any point if anybody has a question, no problem. So groups get stagnated. They eat their local liquidity, and they only have so many resources because these are poor communities. They're the bottom of the pyramid communities. So they've eaten their local resources, not eaten it, but brought it into the system. And that can just rotate only so much. So that limits the growth potential, right? And all of these things are generally done on paper and pen. It's a paper ledger held by 3 people. Excess cash is held in a box with multiple physical locks on it. You can see the translation is pretty easy, actually, if you think about it, how smart contracts and ledgers and all these things they're pretty direct translations. These groups get stagnated and or there's resource loss via people. So people who are unbankable become bankable, which is a good target. But they're moving to a banking system that is essentially a competitor to this group. So when that person leaves, a lot of their resources also leave. So it's left that limited pool of resources even smaller. And so what I proposed in the white paper was that we do savings boosts, where when cycles have their start and end point, which they generally do, which is it's a good thing. It keeps community structures alive and celebration points, and allows for major financing needs to be met seasonally, because most people are farmers. I said, why not start that group at a positive number based on a percentage of their last savings cycles? And that's kind of had some bumps in the road. And so we've had these conversations for a couple weeks within our Save network. And the problem is kind of driven down a little differently. So I'll kind of talk about the guests and the members we have now. So Mark from Self-Driven has contributed every week. He's been really good and kind of understands deep structures. Just a very, very intelligent person. Amy has been there, the professional from savings and lending, communities. We had a person who wrote the framework for Catholic Relief Services come and speak one week. A guy who tracks data for 15 million people who use these systems now, working with Catholic Relief Services and other NGOs. A guy in Kenya who's actually implemented this on Cello, but he does he uses the tokenization for the standardization of different assets, like different resources to bring in. So it's a little bit different than just enhancing the savings with cash activity versus you could save with really anything and just tokenize it within your local community and have exchange. There's been another local guy, Elijah. He's done street culture events here in Zambia, and he's really interested in how we can create lending opportunities in Zambia as well outside of these groups, because there's a lot of cash floating around that there's a lot of scams as well. People get scammed a lot. There's very few safeguards, I would say, within the government and society at times, that they kind of put their eggs in baskets and lose it quickly. Yeah. So the problem we've kind of driven down to now, and I'm going to pull up, I was working on a Fund 12 proposal for concept today, and it'd be kind of cool to kind of go over this with you all if you guys are interested, and kind of give me pointers, and maybe now's a good stopping point to ask for questions. I think Starch Chain is really cool. I think this should be a side chain, like its own safe ecosystem for people to interact. There's a lot of movement towards federated groups. That's something that some of the technology people within the space already, like from the NGO side or consulting side, are working on is federated groups. Yeah. So, any questions?
So I do have a question, and it's hard for me to think about this where I live, right? I'm in the United States, it's a small to medium-sized town area, and it's America. Everybody thinks they should have everything, no matter where it came from, and all that stuff. And so it's kind of hard to think about starting. Yeah. It's kind of hard to think about, an economic circle, that's virtuous in that, profit that's realized, goes back in and creates a positive feedback loop, right? But it's easier for me to imagine that in Africa, but I've never been to Africa, right?
Yeah.
And so,
I mean,
what I wonder about, like with your example of the woman who travels by bus to go get fish to come back and sell, and even with what you're doing with honey and bees, what I'm wondering is, what people, aside from riding a bus to go get fish, in a community like that, how much of what the people need and want is really coming from outside, right?
yeah.
Can,
Yep.
but to me, like, this is the benefit of disinflationary tokenomics, right? If everybody has what they really want right there, then you have that positive feedback loop in that they can become wealthy, right? There's just endless, for the last 100 years, endless accounts of really happy, economically stable countries that have been fucked over by, American hegemonic tactics, where they go in and they take that saved or accumulated value and, force those people into the fiat tit.
Yeah, I mean, I would
And
say that
so,
the challenge there is similar. Like, a lot of what money gets spent on in these groups. So Care International did a study where they had like in the first year of these groups, every dollar invested returns a 9.35x return in the first year, and then up to the fifth year, it totals up to an 18x ish, somewhere there. And so it slows down quickly, or kind of quickly. But the things people spend money on is putting food on the table, like being able to have, or sending kids to school for school fees. Like that education is what can, there are resources, there's plenty of resources, but the education systems are also lacking in their quality as well. So maybe you've been able to flip your money enough within one of these cycles safely and securely with your own resources to send your kid to boarding school in town where the school is marginally better, but they can get a marginally better job than they can get just in the village
right, but part of
or
that, like with kids, like even in the States, clothing your kids well enough to go to school, that's an expense, like for the people in your community. I mean, are they having to import the clothes? Or are they making them themselves, or is that locally produced? And that's kind of what I
I'm
mean. All that kind of stuff that we experience is as real costs, right? In raising a family, how much of
yeah.
that is still internal to the community?
Oh, it's very minimal of that, but that's the system from the top down, right? It's been developed for the last however many millennia to run this
Yeah.
way. It's designed to run
Mm.
this way. So this is just one piece of the puzzle to try and flip it over.
Right. But that's kind of what I mean. Like the only thing that's really keeping these kinds of communities from really, really exploding in the value that they capture of themselves is education. And so that, if they're
Education and
self-sufficient in,
access. Yeah.
right. So if they're sufficient in and of themselves for just daily living and whatever, then what they really need to import is education.
Yeah. No, and that's definitely true. And I think, I think of a similar situation or concept would be in the States would be like local credit unions. So if you work
Mm.
for, let's say, like that's the banking system that I think is the least extractive within the United States banking infrastructure, one of the
If you
least
can,
extractive,
if you can
right?
get in them, right? I've never been
Right.
part of
Yeah. I
anything
mean,
that would
it's
let me be in a credit union.
right. Yeah. So it is. It's there's privilege to that as well. So these structures are open from the bottom up. So these groups can take on new members every week if they want to. They they work like blockchain kind of, where it is a little bit of a financial sandbox that you can kind of push and pull the levers how you want to design the system. So I think after our first couple meetings, a better way of going forward instead of savings groups would be federation of groups, where you could do intergroup lending, because we recently, found out that as these cycles move towards the end of cycles, liquidity starts to build more at the end of cycle. Sure, if they'll be able to pay back in that shorter window of time.
Hey, Kyle, I don't know if you can hear us. I think we might have hit the bandwidth limit. Give him a sec.
Yeah, being in Africa.
Yeah.
Let me know when I'm back.
Hey,
Yeah, you're
you're
back.
back. Great.
There you are.
Yeah,
I
World
thought it was
Mobile.
unusually. I thought
World
it was
Mobile
unusually
comes
good
great, right?
You
connection.
made it pretty far with video. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
But we lost you right in the middle. I think this federated question is
Yeah.
really
So
important.
the federation, it is the right way to go forward. Savings boost would be a step that could be removed later, but create expectations. So that's can be a big issue. I think federation would probably be the best way, and that is what the expert who has the data on 15 million people and all the groups thinks as well. That's what he's working on. Because as one cycle starts, let's say in community A, they get 6 months in and they're running an 8-month cycle. So in those last 2 months, liquidity starts to slow. Borrowing rates start to reduce, and liquidity increases that's not being lent. But in community B, they're 1 month into the start of a new cycle, and they want extra liquidity. So you could at that point feed forward liquidity from past groups in a more secured way and across a common framework of measurement of who accesses what and when amongst everybody in the group. So I really think of these groups are they're not super rigid. They're very flexible. Like there's sometimes when, because you're with your local community at the base level, they understand when you have a problem. They understand when your sister passed away and you need to travel and you need extra money for the bus. That's when you can access the interest-free emergency fund. They would also understand that if you couldn't pay back your loan the next week, that they could give you another month. Like it's all. They also know if you just spent all your money on booze and got drunk every night, they generally the bars are pretty public places. So there's a lot of community accountability, and if you can cross the frameworks where that accountability can still be held, that's going to be, moving that trust upwards will be the biggest challenge, and federation is probably one of the best ways. Treat it like kind of like a interoperable credit union that's more open.
It feels technically possible, right? We recognize that now the technical tools are there. We recognize that trust can be developed at the scale you're describing, and that's pretty exciting to try to take that leap. I know Alex had a hand up a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I'm curious about just how it works in general, but now Kyle mentioned credit unions, and I can just go and read about it. No need to explain that. I'm curious about also just throwing thoughts out, it's like, but what you seem to describing is limited to the scope of the local group. And if we attach like digital technologies to that, what is like, is the point to bring investment from outside and to bring liquidity from other countries, for example? Or do we want to limit that, and do we want to, like, these communities essentially to operate on their own resources? And is there, because like this dynamic is fairly extractive often. And even now, if you look at the geopolitical news, about third to half of the countries right now have difficulty servicing their national debt because the American investment corporations like BlackRock and others, they made like lending to the governments of these countries to the
They
level
did in Zambia. Yeah.
yeah. So
It's been
it's
crazy.
like, are we kind of, how do we prevent them from, like, people from, because this lending without what's it called, personal finance education and some sort of like basics of money management, it could be harmful to the people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, yeah, an education portion will always be necessary, but it also kind of depends on. So I would say one of the core principles would be to keep it as internally resourced as possible. And if external funding is to come into the system, there has to be, measured ways to do it. So I think like there's in the savings and lending mechanism as it exists now really is an identity structure that could be used if, there were people who would want to bank those people essentially. So I think at the base level, this is really like a root identity, like building block that other organizations could co-build or build off of, let's say for their specific needs. So let's look at Empower, who is doing, affordable and sustainable housing across Africa, and other places. This could be an identity measurement to provide that service in a way that they couldn't before, to a customer that they couldn't access before, that the banks can't access. Microfinance institutions often don't access these. There's, you could then go, maybe the group saves up enough money and buys an AirNode and provide and a Starlink system, which is available in Zambia. If that whole thing were to come off, they could. The one I worked with had their own structure. They had a women's community center. They could pop it up top and provide network to their local community that they would produce revenue for. So I think it's really just as a base level of identity and trust and showing that people are responsible with their own assets, and then bringing in external assets in structured and tailored and non-extractive ways. Extraction will always be there to a certain extent if interest is a thing. But I also think so eventually a token would be necessary. I think that token should be rewarded to people via just by the act of saving. So it should, incentivize, it should be a proof of work token where the work is the act of saving. And you could parameterize it of there's a minimum and a maximum already in these groups for what you can save each week. So you have to, there's a minimum savings rate and a maximum savings rate. You can look at that across groups just based on a percentage and, reward for savings that way. You could also do a half reward for the repayments and like different types of where those tokens would have a monetary value, but they would also be using a system. So let's say it's a proof of stake network as well. In some capacity, they need to stake so many tokens as a group to be eligible for third party. So then there's a mechanism for them to qualify into third party lending, or they have to hold so many to have the option to federate. And their local coffer has to be empty. at that moment. Yeah, so it's really this, there's so many ways it could go, but I think over collateralization is a really big key eventually. There's an Ethereum protocol. I guess they're moving on to, they work on Celo as well. If you guys haven't checked out Celo, it's a really good blockchain. It's USSD based, and everybody in the world has a Celo wallet associated with your phone number right now. I can send you money on Celo, and you can just download the wallet and it'll be there. It's really intuitive and cool. Over collateralization is working in Mexico for trade financing of coffee. The coffee has markets in the States. The growers don't have the cash to aggregate and process and move it up the value chain where they get more value and it's not taken off by a middleman. So that is called Ethic Hub. What they've done is when they launched their token, they over collateralized it 2-to-1. So for every 1 token publicly released, there was 2 held in the treasury. And there are different mechanisms to provide collateral, much like Empowa is doing now, but in the trade financing scheme. So you could collateralize the whole system or a region or a group. Each have different risk returns, but you do that with the token. And now the entire system is worth about $13 million. They have $10 million in the treasury and about 2 to 3 million out in tokens. And then there's some in LPs out on DEXs and stuff like that. So if you treat the cash saved by local communities just as any other commodity, you could over collateralize the system in some way. And as you build up that commodity, some of it will be cashed out via tokens, which is fine. We want people to get more money that are at the bottom. We want to provide inequality and create equitable financing mechanisms. So yeah, Steve, I went on a little bit of ramble. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I just give you some impressions and my thoughts. I've always believed that that things at their core are all basically simple, and like what you described, where about the community where you are, like to me it sounds like the hard part of creating a side chain has already organically happened, right? In that sense. And so then all that you really need is somebody to come in and create a ledger book where all of the activity that is already happening can just be shown, right?
Yep. And you could feed that
ledger.
You could feed that through an Oracle, I think is probably the best first way to do it. So you don't have you could still keep savings agnostic in some way.
Right.
You can still save with cash or mobile money or crypto if you want to, but you have the options because the Oracle just mimics transactions.
Right. And so I think the point I'm getting at is what you don't have is, or what you could really have if you put it on a sidechain, if you actually put it in a ledger, is generate that statistical universe that you need, so that like as you accumulate the numbers and see that, oh, actually we've got pluses on one side, and we've been thinking we didn't have enough for the other side, but because the other side has got more positive flow, we can balance this out internally, and that's kind of what I think that, you can do a lot, in a community that is as self-sustaining as you describe. There's really very little that you really need from external sources, and then, you don't need to import, like cash so much as you need to prove what you have as value. And
the cash will come, I think, eventually on its own if the system is robust enough, just like it has to Bitcoin, just like it has to Ethereum, as it continues to come to crypto systems. I think,
and they can also, in doing that, then they can see where they can actually control more of the supply chain, and get more of the profit that other people are getting.
Yeah. I mean,
once you've got that transparent accounting of it all.
Exactly. They won't at that point, the bank won't be able to come to them and say, hey, you're now bankable. Bring 75% of your money to us. We'll give you a loan, and make all these promises that are never kept or are overpromised and under delivered. You now have created the mechanism to keep people in the groups.
Or the banks will have to make bids, and offer the money cheap enough.
Yeah, exactly. It turns into a system where you have a free market rate determined by the groups. Essentially, because that's what all of these things are, right? They are all central bank type mechanisms that are supposed to be more decentrally controlled. So, yeah, I mean, it's really exciting stuff. If there's anybody who wants to, I'm not really super technical. I flew through the Cardano Academy, learned a bunch there. I took a couple courses a couple years ago, but I think I get the ideas pretty well.
You said you're working on a Catalyst proposal?
Yeah. So kind of how far I've gotten there. And I made a spreadsheet as well, and this might be of interest to anybody in the group. So I'm going to share it in the chat. I made a copy of it, but I took the Gitbook thing and like the actual docs and put the use cases. There's the chat. Put the use cases information all on a Google sheet where multiple contributors could have their own tab, and then you can coordinate on a master sheet that gets fed into. So I felt like that was a good way to organize it from like a group level. I can. It's always really hard to find that information, I feel like.
Yeah. Do you have the bandwidth to share screen, or would it help if I did?
Yeah, let me see. Share the screen. So I put the copy that anybody could use in the chat. And then here is up there. Trying to figure out where to put you guys. So yeah, this is kind of the master sheet, right? And then whatever I am to work off of, I can work from here. And then you just go back to the master doc and it says, see, it works. There it is. So I thought it was better than, you can copy and paste it from here onto idea scale, I think. So yeah, I think the title, bringing bottom-up savings and lending communities on chain with identity, transparency, and rewards. Probably take about 12 months because savings and lending cycles run for 12 months. And this proposal, what I have, hasn't even gotten there yet, but it's not really important. Here's my problem statement. 1 billion unbanked people use local rotating capital and lending for their financial needs because the identity barriers and extractive mechanisms of legal finance often leaves these people fully excluded. I have to go back to here. And then through co-cultivation of financial products, identities, and frameworks, local rotating capital can be enhanced for self-driven and actuating community-based financial inclusion on Web3. For links, I have, our website, white paper. I was thinking about a pitch deck and like maybe a short video. Is there anything else you all would recommend in any way?
That seems like a good place to start. Do you have questions from the development perspective? That
Oh, sorry, I thought you just kind of wanted to go through this.
either way, but if mixing between those two.
I mean, not really from the Fund 12 proposal, but because it's really just at the concept stage. But I think we have the tech people, but is anybody in the room aware of Starch chain or the Starch ledger?
You mentioned it earlier, but no, not
So
really.
so it's this really just kind of novel meme coin type side chain on Cardano. It's a single server that this one guy runs. But what it does is it's like kind of proving these concepts, and he's building it like kind of piece by piece and live. So you can buy a Starch Industries miner. It's an NFT. You go to the Starch website and you connect your wallet, and you can click a button that says start mining. It is a proof of attendance protocol. So all you have to do is be on that page for you to have the chance to mine a block. There's a halving every year. It happens in January. He's building the ledger side now. So we've been able to test on the ledger, have a test ledger for a couple weeks now. Yeah, I think it's just it's very egalitarian. So there was no pre-mine. It's really cool to see like a community engagement via a mechanism that is more than just an NFT project or changing your character, or it's connected to something that brings value to the ecosystem. And you can also change your character, right? So and you can do it for free. So he uses SIP 8 instead of SIP 68, and you can edit and add traits to your kind of character, your mining character all the time. Yeah, I don't really know. I think that's maybe a really good place to start if for communities to be engaged in a safe way, where maybe there is one node that kind of runs everything through, or two or three, or some organizations or entities run nodes on behalf to secure the network, but start it very small, just as Cardano did, but do it in an egalitarian way where there's not a pre-mine. Essentially, there's not a pre-sale. It's just the tokens are created through the active saving, or some other mechanism. Yeah.
Steve, it does sound like there's a lot of overlap with some of the stuff you've also been talking about just with proof of work. And you've hinted a little bit about that, but more globally, what are you thinking right now?
Myself or Steve?
Oh, sorry, I was trying to get Steve there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to chat with really anybody who would be interested in learning more. If you have technical development skills and would like to contribute them, I don't know, what do you guys think would be like let's say this for Catalyst would be what would be an expected budget, let's say, to develop frameworks for how to engage with the communities, um, kind of really getting that engagement moving more and building out the frameworks more than the tech. And I know you guys are all a little bit more tech, but
Well, kind of address what you're saying, James. I've been, there are so many impressive people that we know, just what Mix has been doing. So many other people have been doing, Adam Dean has been doing, there are some great smart contracts on their own that have already been built, let alone the smart contract suites. And I think this year for me, I'm my loose plan for this year is to spend my time seeing what is out there and what can be easily packaged together. And, the hope is that, we go through this crypto cycle and come out of it with some capital to just implement a more or less customized smart contract suite for a small community or small businesses, so that they can do what Kyle's here has been describing is basically already done on the community level, but it's not been put on the blockchain. That's kind of where my mind is going right now, James.
Mhm.
And I have talked to Adam Dean a little bit, just in DMs. He's a fellow potato on the starch chain, so I think he's also been working with a little bit on starch. So
Good.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
I'm actually, just due to circumstances, I may be making my journey to Massachusetts for Monday is gonna take me through Indiana, and I'm gonna see if I can hook up with Chris and have him show me starch, because he is wildly exuberant about it.
oh
Because
yeah,
I don't really get it from watching Twitter. It's a bunch of noise, and these guys, there's too many Twitter spaces for me. I haven't been able to lock onto one where they were actually talking about the project itself.
yeah, I think they have starch spaces on Tuesdays and Thursdays. One of
Oh,
them
yeah.
is more of, I think, after the iRacing stuff that Bone Pool and
Yeah,
some other people
that's
do.
there are so many rabbit holes, man, because
Hmm.
these Cardano projects sponsoring race cars is like, who would have predicted that shit? It's just crazy to me. But yeah, they're
Yeah.
doing it.
Well, I think I'm all set and kind of presented on what I can at the moment. I think there's a lot of really cool things that can be done with what is coming, and even bridging this over with the Cello ecosystem via a sidechain where there's multiple offboarding options. Could be really cool. Or creating, is anybody aware of like what with Plutus V3 there was an ability to lock and unlock tokens from an Ethereum address on from a Cardano address.
Yeah,
So
that
you
was
sign.
demonstrated. Yeah. Yeah.
So I would think you could essentially bridgelessly lock and unlock tokens from Cardano to Ethereum in that way. Would that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what it implies.
There's a lot of talk about all that stuff right now, and I'm not so sure about that. I think
Yeah, I mean,
there's
it
this
could be.
difference, right? Like these kinds of things, right? Those things are, people are really going after shit like that, Kyle, because of scale, right? They're talking
Yeah,
big money, and like this is not. I think that
well,
that here, I just want to say that the Plutus version 3, for me, as I understand it right now, what's most interesting about version 3 for you in the situation you're describing is the apparently government-oriented new functions in version 3.
Yeah,
And
like
what that will represent in terms of small community governance or federated community governance.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's the more interesting thing about that.
I mean, one of the beautiful pieces that I didn't even mention of these systems are that they are self-governed. I think I kind of did, but they get generally how they're formed is there's a workshop put on by some NGO. A couple members from a community go and learn how to implement that over the course of like a week or so. They get kind of like a mentor that kind of checks in with them, and then they go build their group within their community. And um, they have a constitution essentially that's a blank framework that they work together on and all sign off on what interest rates are, how many members, lengths of loans, what kind of extra non-savings funds are there. It's really cool, and it's so like it's built for blockchain. I it's not meant to be built any other way, in my mind. If it's going to grow and continue to provide further financial inclusion and access for for the same people who use them, in ways that they control, as they do now. Yeah, that's kind of where I'll end it there. There's no more questions.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about the technical question,
Okay.
and what's interesting with regards to this project is, like many projects that move into deeper and more legitimate problem solving, there's really two categories of technical development. There's all the on-chain stuff, the app building stuff that's pretty easy to predict, right? What the scope of that's going to be.
Hmm.
But it doesn't speak at all to that end user problem, right? How are we going to put a Web3 wallet in the hand of this person or that person?
Hmm.
And that's where I think you have an opportunity to be a leader, right? Like this is, if you have clear scope of what you need, you have an understanding of, even if it's not fully technical, right? But you have an understanding of, hey, can we implement something like this from this protocol and like that from that protocol? Even broad strokes like that might be enough to help a developer have a really good conversation about, okay, yeah, I could do that. And I could combine them this way. We could build it in this amount of time for this budget and so forth. But in the back of every dev's mind is going to be, yeah, but even if we build the perfect on-chain thing, how does it get
Who's going
into,
to use it? Yeah.
yeah. So and that's the one, like we all know that's one of the most interesting problems,
Yeah.
right? So think about, I think a really good exercise for you as you're refining the proposal is at least have a high level answer to that question.
Yeah. I mean, the
You know,
biggest like the biggest influencers, I would say, or like, influences of this space are like large multinational and non-governmental organizations. So there, Catholic Relief Services is huge. CARE is really big. CARE International. CARE is actually probably one of the best organizations to try and work with this on, because they are moving to digital. Like they're doing a big digital drive. Everybody's moving to digital, but everybody's just building a digital ledger on your phone that the banks don't want, like that information doesn't qualify for their KYC AML, qualification systems. So you need a new type of framework that is, you know, and the associated finance that moves with it. But CARE would be a great one. I've tried to make some contact with BRAC International, which is a very large, microfinance institution. they work with like kind of community resources a little bit more than just supporting groups, but groups are a part of their framework. But yeah, they there's lots of huge entities that do this, and people have been trying to crack this code of how do we get further financing in a responsible manner into these groups since I was, I started working with the group. That was questions that the professionals were asking at that point, and nobody's cracked it. Very few have. It's taken the UN, the Development Bank of Uganda, and two other like non-governmental organizations to be guarantors for a loan for an entity that just wanted to be a digital ledger app on your phone that then had to become a financial institution if the funding were to be able to flow to these groups. It did. They had to become a financial institution, but they didn't want to be. It's wild.
Kyle, because it's so problematic, just the mechanics of getting this on individual people's phones. What I'm wondering whether you might
you started at a
consider.
group level, I think.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying. Since you've already got a community there working together on this level, for your catalyst proposal, what I'm wondering if maybe you might not want to just set up a hub, with 1, 2, 3 computers, and that way people can come in and do the stuff that we would do on our phones, but they can do it there with guidance, with somebody to help them, and they can maintain their own private keys that way, right? And their access to their funds, and then all of that under that kind of sidechain kind of ledger possibility for outside people.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with putting actual transactions on chain at the beginning will be the adjustment of use. Like what is your routine now? You don't want to disturb that routine as like little as possible.
Exactly.
So just mimicking the transactions and having a USSD menu, so like a star like 1, 2, 3, and then a hash is how mobile money systems work. It's a USSD menu through cell phone carriers. That can be good enough for just the input of information into ledgers. And if you had, let's say, 4 people inputting that information into their existing digital ledger technology that they use that doesn't provide them really any value besides it being digital instead of on a computer or a piece of paper, you then feed that into an oracle and provide a reward for just saving. And then eventually those rewards become more valuable as you get the more on-chain mechanics into the system. But that's, I think at minimum from a date of a proof of concept launch, you need at least 3 savings cycles where from there you could potentially bring in external lending. But that's at least 2 years down the line, probably more. It just really depends on who has the appetite, who wants to do it. So yeah, I'll wrap up there unless there's anything else.
Yeah, I have a small comment. First of all, very exciting topic. Thank you for sharing all the information. It was not in the first few minutes, but I heard 15 minutes in. Yeah, no, exciting topic, and I think it's a big challenge, as you already mentioned in there, and then there is frustration at it. I mean, I'm not sure all the care and then UN and all the one you mentioned there. I'm not sure they are not part of the problem more than part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the big question is how we start from the ground. We can see it in a lot of solutions, but how really to start from the ground, build it in one place, see how to duplicate that. And that's very tough, right? And maybe find the right partners on the ground, like small partners that really work with the people that don't earn much. Yeah, and that's from my small experience on that. You know, microfinance you mentioned is, you know, yeah, I mean, everyone makes money except for understanding where the money goes on the ground, right, in
Yeah,
microfinance.
yeah,
So billions of
exactly.
dollars, all the banks makes money and profit, but okay, what's the impact on the ground?
People have
No one
gone
really knows.
from making $2.03 a day to $2.08 a day.
Yeah, or even worse, right? Even they give you
Yeah,
money, but you need to buy the chemicals for me for the next harvest, for the next
yeah,
planting.
yeah.
So,
The impacts are long and short term. Ugh.
so it's about, so the only, again, it's very tough, it's very complex because if you want to start from the ground, it's always tough. And it's kind of how you scale from the ground.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
to
yeah.
start from there.
Yeah, and I think partnering, with these organizations who we have connections with already, a bit, can really help drive that value forward and pretty deep, pretty quickly, I think. So thanks for the contribution. And Yoram, I'd also like to chat. I heard you're doing satellite data on chain, right?
I'm not doing, I mean, I'm just coordinating
Okay.
the team. I mean, for me, satellite technology can bring scale, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't replace the work on the ground, but that can bring scale. And if we're able to bring enough satellite data at a cheap price, we're able actually to give farmers the ability, you're able to disrupt the microfinance kind of supply chain. And
Hmm.
farmers, you know, the quality of their land, maybe microfinance companies can pitch them, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the
So
end goal, but I'm just putting people together that I'm not really, yeah, and it's a very exciting
yeah,
project.
yeah. There's actually, I think, this is kind of out of the scope of Save, but there is actually, I think, a good opportunity to work with some conservation organizations,
Yeah,
around that, especially with the Fund 12 RWI. So I'll kind of make a little pitch for this. I went to a nature-based solutions conference February. There was one of Africa's largest conservation organizations who co-manages national parks presented on what they're calling their verified nature unit. And what that did was split up a national park into square kilometers and sold square kilometers of the parks to donors. There was no real incentive mechanism, but the appetite is there. And I also spoke with other conservation friends and partners, and they said that they were speaking with people last week about endangered species tokenization. But their concern was that one entity would have access to all the information, and that could potentially compromise very important and secure information. So I said, well, that's what a public ledger brings you. So if there's interest in
yeah. So
running on
the
that
aim of
trend,
this,
I'm happy to connect and make a meeting.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm happy to connect you to the right people. I mean, the objective of this specific kind of project is to create a satellite oracle on Cardano. So it's a group of different companies coming together to create this
Okay.
oracle, and that able to then connect to any type of application related to sustainability or agriculture supply chain and stuff like that. But it's
Yeah,
quite
that would be.
complex.
Yeah. No, for sure. The the real scientists, the hard scientists, do all that work. We work with some of
And
them on the beekeeping stuff, and they are really smart, deep, like biology scientists, the ones we interact with, but they also know GIS. So
Complex, but one of the companies inbound, I mean, it's a different topic, but it's kind of doing one of the best farmland borders out there using the satellite technology, and that's essential for farmer to serve the farm border. But anyway, but it's a complex topic, and up to now, with all the big satellite and so on, there's not many business models that actually work. Either you go for intelligence or project based, but it's exciting.
yeah. Well, cool. Keep up the good work on all that front.
Yes, sir. You too.
You too, Kyle. Yeah, thanks for this presentation today, and keep us posted on how the proposal's coming together. It's exciting.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me. Thanks for chatting. We have our general meetings on Thursdays from 1 to 3 UTC or 2 to 4 UTC. It alternates every week so we can accommodate some contributors that are based, so they don't have to be up at 1 a.m.
And where can people find those details? Sorry.
I just posted a link on our Twitter. There's a Discord link there, and if you jump into the Discord, we can get you that information. It's not, I don't want to publicly throw the link out there, just to not get spammed and stuff. So
Got you.
kind of like you guys with the registration. Yeah. So
Cool.
yeah.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Kyle.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you very much, Carl. Good luck.
Thanks, everybody. See you
Thank
soon.
you.
Cheers.